information on events as they are happening. If it's breaking news, it's Nile TV.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to your afternoon edition of Panorama News. I'm your host, Nancy Sarah Barakat, and as always, we'll start off with a look at the news making headlines. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi marks the 64th National Police Day. Chinese President Xi Jinping wraps up his three-day visit to Egypt. And South Sudan's government formation delayed as rebels reject new states. Welcome back. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi marked the 64th National Police Day with a ceremony that was held at the New Cairo Police Academy. During a speech, the President paid tribute to the families of the martyrs from the police force and honoured their widows and children. Earlier, the President laid a wreath of flowers on the monument that commemorates the martyrs of the police force. Here's a closer look.
Al-Sisi arrived in the Cairo Police Academy to mark the 64th National Police Day, which takes place on the 25th of January. Minister of Interior, General Megdi Abdel Ghaffar, addressed the ceremony and said that January the 25th is a source of pride for all Egyptians, adding that the implementation and completion of the transitional roadmap is the way to build the country. The minister also said that police officers will continue to defend and secure the country. Meanwhile, the President gave a speech to the attendees where he paid tribute to the families of the police martyrs, saying that the policemen always pay the price of securing the country and that Egypt will never forget their role in defending it. He assured that Egypt will take revenge for the blood of the martyrs, adding that the road to development depends on a lot of hard work. The Sisi stressed the importance of the policemen's role and their exerted efforts for the sake of the country, also praising the role of women in the police apparatus. Earlier, the President laid a wreath of flowers on the memorial monument of the police martyrs, where he was accompanied by the Minister of Interior. As the 5th anniversary of the January 25th revolution approaches, the Ministry of Interior is extending its security measures throughout the country, planning for the National Police Day celebrations. Despite calling for the celebrations of Police Day, the ministry announced a high security alert throughout Egypt and will deploy heavily armored troops in public squares in front of the police station and governmental buildings. The ministry also announced that all vacations are cancelled for officers and soldiers. The holiday commemorates and is a remembrance of the 50 officers killed and more than 80 wounded when they refused the British demands to hand over their weapons and evacuate the Ismailia police station on January 25, 1952. The British Army had surrounded the police station and took over. January 25th was declared an official holiday in 2009 to recognize the efforts of the police to maintain the security and stability of Egypt.
In other local related news, Chinese President Xi Jinping has wrapped up his three-day visit to the country. Prior to his departure, the Chinese head of state toured Luxor's historic landmarks, including the Karnak Temple and several other tourist destinations on the western side of the Nile River. President Xi was accompanied by the Minister of Antiquities, the Governor of Luxor, and a number of public figures. The prior Chinese president is continuing his tour of the Middle East and has arrived in Iran. To regional news now, and U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has arrived in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, hoping for an easing of tensions between the kingdom and its predominant rival Iran. Kerry was to attend a joint meeting with his Saudi counterpart Adel Al-Jubeir and other foreign ministers from the Six-Nation Gulf Cooperation Council. He will also hold talks with King Salman and his son, the Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the country's Minister of Defense. Syrian armed rebel groups said they held the government and Russia responsible for any failure to peace talks to end the country's civil war, even before negotiations due to start in Geneva next week. Syria's opposition has demanded an end to government sieges and a halt to Russian air raids as goodwill measures before they attend talks set for January the 25th. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry insists the talks must go ahead next week. Here's the story.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said he was confident Syria's peace talks would proceed after he held talks with the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC states in Saudi Arabia. The Syria peace talks were planned to begin on January 25th in Geneva, but there is uncertainty around the date, partly because of the dispute over who will be part of the opposition delegation. Kerry said major countries would convene after the first round of negotiations. Peace efforts face huge underlying challenges, among them disagreements over the President Bashar al-Assad's future and worsening relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Tensions between the two regional rivals escalated this month after the Saudi execution of the Shiite Muslim cleric. That triggered an attack by Iranian protesters on the Saudi embassy in Tehran, leading the kingdom to cut diplomatic ties. Saudi Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir said his country was working with the U.S. to find ways to remove Assad from power. He downplayed any change in U.S.-Iran relations after an agreement that, with world powers on Iran's nuclear program, led them to lift sanctions on Iran. Kerry said the lifting of sanctions presented an opportunity to work together with Iran to address some of the worries Saudi Arabia and other countries had. Kerry met earlier in Riyadh with representatives of the six nations of the GCC, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates. He is due to hold talks with Riyadh Hijab, chair of the Syrian opposition's High Negotiations Committee, which was formed in Riyadh last month.
Foreign rivals in South Sudan missed a key deadline to forge a unity government, with rebels rejecting President Salva Kiir's creation of new regional states as fighting continues. The rivals were supposed to form a government by January 22nd, but rebels say Kiir's nearly tripling of the number of regional states in December undermines a fundamental pillar of an August power-sharing deal to end 2 years of civil war. Key international backers, the so-called Troika, made up of key donors Britain, Norway and the United States, as well as the European Union, said this week that the talks were deadlocked. Civil war began in December of 2013 when Kiir accused his former deputy Riek Machar of planning a coup, setting off a cycle of retaliatory killings that have split the poverty-stricken country along ethnic lines. Tunisia's Prime Minister Habib Essid held an emergency cabinet meeting after authorities declared a nighttime curfew nationwide following the worst outbreak of social unrest since the 2011 revolution. Essid met his defense and interior ministers before the cabinet session as journalists reported relative calm in towns rocked by clashes between protesters and police in recent days. 5 years after the overthrow of longtime dictator Zain al-Abidine Ben Ali, street demonstrations against unemployment and poverty have again shaken the North African nation. In a televised address to the nation on Friday, President Beji Said Essebsi expressed understanding for the frustrations vented in impoverished regions of central Tunisia, but he warned against ill-intentioned hands exploiting the legitimate grievances of demonstrators. UN Security Council ambassadors and African Union leaders met for crisis talks on Burundi after the government refused a proposed AU force to stem violence in the troubled country. The meeting in the AU headquarters in Ethiopia comes a day after the UN envoys met with President Pierre Nkurunziza in Burundi, where they appealed for him to take urgent action to stop the violence sparked by his re-election. UN Council envoys have pushed for the government to hold talks with the opposition and agreed to the presence of international troops, such as a proposed 5,000-strong African Union force to restore stability. From Burundi to Eritrea, where President Isaias Afwerki dismissed fears that the Horn of Africa nation faces a food crisis, despite sweeping drought across the wider region, leaving millions in need of aid. Floods and failed rains caused by the El Niño weather phenomenon have sparked a dramatic rise in the number of people going hungry in East Africa, with authoritarian and isolated